There was a group of gang walking at night. One of their members' car tire was slashed with a knife on it. The head of the member, Ellis, told one of his men, Pete, to take his SUV to pick up Rishi's car since the tire was slashed. At first, Pete didn't want to go because he thought it wasn't supposed to be his job. Tom, who was on Pete's side, told Ellis that Pete was right. But then, Ellis got angry and told Tom to watch his mouth and go with Pete to take Ellis's SUV and do as he said earlier. Ellis then left Pete and Tom to do the job. When Tom was having a time of his own in a dark aisle, a sharp knife was thrown at his hand and his knee. He then screamed and panicked. He saw a man wore a black hoodie and he couldn't see his face. This man pointed his knife at Tom's neck and asked earlier that night. Tom and his gang went to a house in Queen Anne, killed a man and a woman, and left a girl. This mysterious guy asked where the girl was. Unfortunately, Tom insisted that he didn't know that there was even a girl there. His job was only just sending messages. Since the mysterious guy didn't get the answer, he also wanted to send a message to Tom's gang. He then cut Tom's hand in a flash to deliver his message. The next day, Detective Santiago and his partner, Detective Vasquez, went for a drive, and it seemed like they have their own important destination and mission. While inside the car, they were listening to radio news about mass child abduction that was happening on the city. Detective Santiago's partner seemed restless hearing that news, and then she turned off the radio. Inside a building that seemed sketchy, Detective Santiago went inside on his own since his partner didn't want to deal with the drug addicts inside. He then went through a dark and creepy hallway, went to a room, knocked on its door, and came out a woman. From her appearance, it's obvious that this woman was a drug addict. Detective Santiago then asked her about a missing 2-year-old boy who turned out to be her son. Not long after that, a delivery man came with a huge TV. This woman then told him to put the TV inside, which clearly showed that she didn't really care about her missing son. After that, her neighbor came, and this drug addict woman told Santiago that it was her neighbor who reported the missing file. The neighbor told Santiago that she was suspicious that the drug addict mother sold her own son to buy some drugs. They then got into an argument and left. Santiago felt helpless. The next day, Max and his partner were walking to a cafe. He made some time to call on his daughter to say sorry because he forgot to pick her up from the school. His daughter complained because he was always busy with his job. To make that up, he promised her to read her bedtime story later on that night, and her daughter seemed happy with that idea. He then continues talking with his wife. While inside the cafe, Ellis and his gang were having a meeting. They added a new member, Jerry. The rest of the gang didn't seem happy at what they saw because Jerry seemed suspicious. But then came Ellis, and he stands his point at Jerry to not mess with him. Outside, Max hung up his phone with his wife, and he went inside the cafe. The next thing he noticed was he saw Jerry. He then decided to approach him and asked him why he was gone for quite some time. Jerry, who seemed tense and panicked because of Max's questions, immediately told Max to go away. He explained to Ellis that Max was his lawyer. Ellis then closed up his meeting right away and whispered something to Roxy, his left hand. After that, Roxy approached Max and asked for his business card. Max explained that he is a real estate attorney. Roxy then flirted with him, and then she left. Max's partner asked about that, and Max said this girl was with the people who hung with his brother earlier. Max, who was working late at night, received a call from Jerry. Max was pissed about how Jerry reacted earlier, but then there was no sound by the phone at all. Max thought that Jerry would call back. After that, Max's wife called, and she asked about why he didn't get home as he promised. Max told her that he had to do a presentation by the morning and asked about his daughter. During their conversation, Max felt a stinging pain on his head. His wife worried and made him promise to take the medicine in the morning. After they hung up, the bell rang on Max's wife home, who was alone only with her daughter. It was Jerry. He asked to be buzzed in, and she let him in. Jerry then came in, with a body got beaten up and a person pointing a gun on his head in front of Max's wife and daughter. The next morning, when Max was having a meeting, he was interrupted by Detective Santiago. It was reported that Max's wife and Jerry was brutally murdered by bad people and kidnapped Max's daughter. Turned out, Jerry was also an FBI agent. He was on a mission and murdered earlier that night. Detective Santiago's partner, Detective Vasquez, was convinced that Max was the perpetrator of the murder. She thought Max's wife and Jerry was having an affair while Max was working, and he found out about the affair when he came home. Detective Santiago, on the other hand, had a different opinion. He was sure that Max was the victim and that his family were murdered. So he went to the interview room where Max was crying and reminiscing about his daughter. Detective Santiago and Max were having a conversation, and turned out Max and Jerry was a former US Navy, but Max got discharged during his service. They also talked about family. Santiago convinced Max that he would try his best to find his daughter. Max then asked what Santiago would do if they switched position. Bewildered, Santiago told Max that he would torture the people who did that. Max then went back to his house, even though he was told not to because it was a crime scene. He then saw that there was blood all over his place, and it was wrecked. Moreover, there was someone who tried to cuff him, and it was Jerry's friend. He explained that everything that happened was all Max's fault, because he blew Jerry's disguise at the cafe. They were trying to sneak into a firm who did human trafficking and sold the organs of kids. He also explained that Ellis got suspicious after Max came up to Jerry at the cafe. Jerry's friend then gave Max a set of keys. It was from Jerry, and he told his friend that if anything ever happened to him, he had to give the key to Max. Not so long after, Detective Santiago's partner, Detective Vasquez, knocked on Max's door and told him that he should not be there. Max told Jerry's friend that she was a cop, and she maybe could help them, but Jerry's friend said that Detective Vasquez was with the bad guy. So they told Max to run away, and Detective Vasquez got in. She then shot Jerry's friend in the chest and asked about Ellis's money. Unfortunately for her, Jerry's friend had already activated a grenade that finally killed them both. Max, who saw the explosion from the outside of his house, knew for sure that there was something clearly wrong. He then went into an old warehouse where Jerry's keys can be used. He found an old car that reminded him of Jerry. Besides that, he also found a computer before he could access all of the data inside. He felt a stinging pain at his head again. This time, the pain was unbearable and caused Max to pass out right away. Meanwhile, at the office, Detective Santiago was told by his captain that they found $50,000 in Detective Vasquez's apartment and a pound of drugs. The police chief also told Santiago that Max's case was taken by the FBI, and it was closed as murder-suicide. He told Santiago that Max used to serve in military. He had brain injury, had trauma, and PTSD. However, Santiago insisted that Max was innocent. On the other side, Ellis had a meeting with his superior in a cafe. It was a woman called Mr. Tank. She told Ellis that all the time Ellis had worked for the firm, he had done a great job. It was also unfortunate for them because an FBI agent, Jerry, got infiltrated into the firm and knew about their job. Ellis convinced her that everything got under control. He got rid of Jerry and his friend. But things had gone aside, and they lost their money. She then got angry and told Ellis to do his job right this time. At the warehouse, Max gained his consciousness. He passed out on the floor, and then he saw something under the couch, a bag full of cash. He didn't know whom the money belonged. Despite that, he focused on preparing himself. He started to investigate the missing children cases, and he trained his skill once again. During this time, Santiago was having a bit of family trouble. His second son told him at the car that his mom met a guy who fancies her at work. Though Santiago felt irritated, he decided to ignore his children. He drove his children back to his ex-wife and asked her if she can spare some time to talk about the divorce. But out of his expectation, she blew off and told Santiago to stop ignoring his children. Santiago was left speechless. On the other side, Ellis and his gang were hanging out at a pub. He arranged a face-to-face meeting with Mr. Austin. He told Mr. Austin that he had lost the money Mr. Austin gave him, and it turned out that the people who were supposed to deliver that money was FBI agent. Mr. Austin seemed ignorant because he knew that it wasn't his problem. However, Ellis still asked the money back from him in a full amount. He had his son against him. Ellis told Mr. Austin that his son wouldn't be as it is now if it wasn't because of Ellis. Sadly for Ellis, Mr. Austin had seen this coming from Mr. Tank. He knew that Ellis would do this, and Mr. Austin didn't give him the money he asked. Ellis then got very angry and killed a random man on the toilet of the pub. When they were about to go home, one of Ellis's car tire got slashed, just as the same as the first scene of the movie. Back to police station, Detective Santiago had done his research about the abducted children all over the city. He reported to his captain that there was something off with the cases. He suspected that the parents in dangerous areas were selling their child's organ for money. While for the rich parents, they suddenly take back their children off of the waiting list for the organs. That's why the abductors didn't ask for ransom. On the other side, at Ellis's house, he was disturbed by his subordinate. He didn't like that they come to his house to talk about work. Pete told Ellis that Tom was killed, and they found a small box in his car. That box contained Tom's hand, and Ellis thought that it was the firm who killed Tom and sent him the message. Pete then volunteered to talk to the firm, but Ellis didn't agree because of how arrogant Pete was acting, and he was a big mouth. Not so long after, Ellis killed him with the help of Roxy. She stabbed Pete in his mouth until he's dead. Back to the police station, Detective Santiago and his captain took Mr. Austin for an interview. They asked why did Mr. Austin suddenly took Michael off of the waiting list. Austin explained that he took his son for a kidney transplant in China. Santiago seemed like he didn't believe Austin. After that, he gave a CCTV capture that showed Austin brought a box for organ. Austin was busted for buying the kidney from the black market. Santiago's captain then asked where he found the dealer. Austin, who was afraid, cried, and then he was desperate enough to tell the officials about Ellis. At night, one of Ellis's men was driving on the road. Little did he know, he was followed by Max, who was using the car his brother gave him. Max then stopped in front of Kiko's car. The light turned green, Max didn't budge, and Kiko started losing his temper. He kept honking at Max's car. The next thing he knew, Max turned around his car until the car was side by side. When Kiko saw Max, he started to throw some death threats at him, and Max threw a knife to his neck. When Kiko tried to get out of the car and walk away, Max killed him with an axe. He took Kiko's picture and sent it to Ellis right away. The scene then moved to Ellis, who was just throwing his trash out. When he got in, he saw Kevin, Mr. Tank assistant. Kevin asked for the money that was lost. He held a gun and pointed straight to Ellis. Ellis was lost for words. He couldn't get a huge amount of money in a heartbeat. Kevin only gave him a week for Ellis to return the money to Mr. Tank. After Kevin went home, Roxy called Ellis and told him that Kiko had died. At first, they thought it was the firm that killed Kiko, but Ellis knew that it was someone else's work and not the firm. On the other side, Detective Santiago was having an investigation on Max's profile during his time in the army. It was shown that Max had assault record, and he was also sent into a mental hospital. Santiago took note on every red flag he could find on Max's records. The next day, Max, who was busy with his weapon at the warehouse, received a message from Ellis. Ellis sent him a location where they both could meet. Max went there straight away. He found Ellis, who was with his subordinate in an abandoned warehouse. Max pointed his gun at Ellis and asked where his daughter was. But then, Ellis explained to him that all of these problems were caused by Jerry. Ellis told Max that that night, Ellis didn't know it was Max's family that Jerry called. Ellis kept putting the blame on Jerry, called him a two-faced person. Max, who was engulfed by rage, didn't care about Ellis' explanation and kept asking about his daughter, Ari. When Ellis said that his daughter was behind him, Max was punched until he lost his consciousness. When Max awoke, he had tied onto a chair with two of Ellis's men. One of them, Junior, decided to torture Max by inserting a burned paper clip inside Max's nail. He was tortured. But the other man said to Junior to not torture Max because Ellis wouldn't like it. He kept doing it anyway until Ellis found out. Ellis then said sorry to Max straight away, and he offered him a proposition. Ellis told Max that he would return Max's daughter if Max gave back the money that Jerry stole. If he can do that, Ellis would forget about all of that. Max agreed to that. After that, Ellis, Roxy, and one of them drove off to Max's warehouse. Through the way, Ellis said to his subordinate that he wanted them to send Junior to the butcher. Ellis wanted to kill Junior because of the way Junior tortured Max, and he also told them that he wanted to make a whole new crew. Back to Ellis's place, Junior was chilling and Detective Santiago suddenly came and pointed a gun at him. Junior led him inside where then he found Max, who was tied on a chair. Santiago then told Junior to release Max. After Max was free, Santiago handcuffed Junior, but somehow Max suffocated Santiago until he lost his consciousness. At Max's warehouse, Roxy and her friend started to look for the money. She then found out about the missing children files that Max had. While Roxy's friend kept looking for the money, she reported to Ellis. After that, the money was found inside a box. Roxy, who just got back, told her friend to take the money back. However, the bag got stuck. After Roxy saw that, she knew that the box was connected to a wire to deactivate a grenade. Too late for her and her friend, the grenade exploded. Ellis, who waited outside in his car, found out that the money also got exploded along with his men. Because of the deadline, Ellis still had to give the money back to Mr. Tank. He went back to his warehouse only to find Junior got his stomach gutted inside out by Max. Ellis then met Mr. Tank and Kevin at the cafe. He gave them only a little amount of burned money from the explosion. Kevin and Mr. Tank were perplexed, and before they could ask anything more, Ellis planted bullets on them from behind the briefcase and quickly left them dead at the cafe. The scene then moved to Santiago's captain, who received a call from Santiago. He's at Ellis's house. Even though the captain told Santiago to stay at his car and watch the house from outside, Santiago was already inside Ellis's house. He found a weed and smoked it right away while he was waiting for Ellis. After Ellis got home, he found the ashes of his son were gone. He then heard a rumbling outside, and it was Max who drifted around with his car and spread the ashes on the road. Ellis then got into his car and went after Max, while Santiago hid in his car. The three of them then went into an old warehouse. At the old warehouse, Max pointed a gun at Ellis and asked where his daughter was. Ellis didn't want to tell them still, but then came Santiago, and he told Max to not kill Ellis. During this argument, Ellis told Santiago that he also wanted to kill his younger son. Santiago was shocked, and Ellis told him that Detective Vasquez was the one who gave him the information about Santiago's son. After that, Santiago didn't want to caught Ellis anymore. He then gave Ellis to be taken care by Max. The next thing happened, Ellis and Max got into a knife fight. Of course, Ellis didn't win. Because Max didn't kill him right away, Ellis yelled. Before he could finish his words, Max came with a nail bat and smashed Ellis until he's dead. While at the station, Santiago, who just got a call from his ex-wife, who told him that she had agreed to meet with him and spend some quality time with him, felt so happy. He even cried and promised her to quit his job and focused more on the family and the children. After the call, Santiago got called by his captain, and he showed him news where there was a man who saw Max did a killing. That man only described Max as a tall, big, and pale person. Santiago acted like he didn't know anything about it in front of his captain. He was too excited to meet his family. Not so long after, Santiago was having a quality time playing catch with his sons and his wife. During that, he received a message from Max, asking for the monster's address. The last scene showed where Max went to the drug addict woman's apartment earlier where Santiago was there. This time, Max brought his nail bat with him and killed the woman.